Oh, das ist gut. Das brauchst du dann gleich.
Ich glaube, wir müssen raus.
Ja, Livestream-Intro. Vielleicht sind Leute online da. Und alles, was du sagst, soll ich.
Kann gegen mich folgen.
Genau so. Ja, genau. Ja, Entwickler. Sollen wir
Du sagst auch noch was.
ja, aber du machst erst deins oder ich mach und du musst dann.
Ich kann
mach
nicht.
dann.
Dann gebe ich dir den Ball.
Genau.
Ich halte das auch einfach fest, wenn es okay ist.
Ja, halt ist einfach so. Das macht leichter, glaube ich. Ja, so geht's halt am schnellsten. Du müsstest vielleicht. Das würde ich so machen.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rheinhaus. I see a few faces who have been here already. That's one. And I think there's another one, actually. This guy, right? A few times. Who have never been here before. Never. Great. So you're lying back there. I saw that. You're not raising your hand. That's fine. I'm Thomas from Modular. We own the space here. We don't call it Modular, which is our company name. We call it Rheinhaus because we want to make this a place for people to gather around, get inspiration, work together. So this year, this format today is one example of many different occasions where we invite people to come here for workshops, for conferences, but also for just collaborating. So in case you want to rent a space for workshops or just rent a flex desk here, that's always possible. We at Modular do product design, so everything UX, you can look it up. I don't do too much talking now. So I just want to wish you a lot of fun today, a lot of inspiration, because that's what we're here for. And yeah, I hope you have a good time. I get to speak to you, and I hope you people get to know each other if you don't know already. So have a great time, enjoy, and talk to you soon.
So hi everyone, my name is Daniel. Usually Julia is doing this intro stuff, but she's currently on her way to Amsterdam. So I'm doing this. You can still call me Julia if you want, but I'm Daniel. And I saw that many of you are here for the first time. So I want to give a little introduction to what the Social Developers Club is. We are usually doing meetups like this, but also conferences like this, which was happening beginning of May. And we also do workshops for kids or for like more grown-up people who still want to learn tech in all different areas. So we have machine learning workshops. We have also like SEO workshops and all the ranges. And if you're interested also in giving a workshop or giving a talk or hosting a meetup, feel free to approach me or Yatta, and we can figure it out that way. About us, we have different values, and maybe it's the best to give you a little story, which I didn't talk to Julia that I will tell this because it also didn't bring me in the best light, I guess. But we had once a meetup where I was pretty eager to host it. It was at a bigger company, and basically, I sorted out all speakers and so on and so forth, and I sent it to Julia, and it was like, yeah, here's the list, we just need to do it. The issue was I only sent her all male speakers, and she was like, yeah, ain't gonna happen, we were not doing this. And I was like, come on, Julia, it's this company, we need to do it. And she was like, no, did you even try to be diverse? And I was like, yeah, I wrote this and that. And she was like, no, we can't like give a meetup where we don't try our best to be diverse. And it was like a big learning for me and also a tough learning, but it also shows that we take it really, really seriously when it comes to host all backgrounds, all skills, all nationalities, and want to welcome everyone to our meetup. And that's why we are basically doing it. And the reason is that we just, try our best to be, for example, at the last conference we had in May, we were 50-50, so which was quite nice. And the way we do it, or how we want to do it, is in events we always tell people, because when we are talking to each other, we're usually standing in a circle, and we call this the Pac-Man circle. So if you're like standing in a circle, always make sure to leave some room so people can join, or you can invite people to join. So it makes easier for us to just connect and feel invited and be open for everyone. Also, we take pictures and videos. I guess if you have a sticker, we will not film you. And if you get photographed, then we will, of course, not publish it. But I don't see any stickers, so you will be published. And also we do, of course, more events. The next one is Tech for Good, skill-based volunteering. And the next one will be, including with Yatta, at Sustainable Tech, rethinking progress for a planet in need. So if you want, that's like a really cool one. And let's just go back for the 2 meetups. You may want to photograph it? No? Yes? No? Okay. Just a little hint. But for our talk today, we have Steffi for the first talk. She's a machine learning and data engineer and at Innovex, am I right? And we'll talk today about how AI is widening the social divide. So without further ado, I would hand over to Steffi. Ja, du kannst halten oder anklicken, wenn du willst.
Gut, ich versuche mal mich zu koordinieren. Okay, so thanks for having me, first of all. Yeah, this talk is, I think, the 6th iteration that I'm giving on this. So I actually originally prepared this talk for EuroPython 2021, and some things have changed since then, as you can imagine. So let's see how up to date I am today with it. So a few words about myself. I'm Steffi. I'm a machine learning engineer, as I've been introduced, and I enjoy a few different things. Most of all, I enjoy laughing, but actually I think that a lot of what's happening in the AI space is not really a laughing matter, and we'll see what I'm getting into right now. So imagine that you're driving down the highway when you're suddenly being pulled over by the police. They check your driver's license in their system, and they find that the picture on your driver's license matches the one of a person that is wanted for an armed robbery. You know that you didn't commit this crime, but the cops think you do. So what might be going on here? Well, it could be something like this. So there might be AI behind it, actually. So there's a system that matches the photograph with a database of photographs of people that are wanted for certain crimes, right? And there's a false match, essentially. So the cops take you in, and you're going to jail. Well, if you think this is actually a drastic example, this happened to at least 3 black men in the US in the last 5 years. So what I'm talking about is actually reality by this point. And today I want to look at how things like these can actually happen by getting into the standard AI development process, which basically consists of 4 steps. First, the research and funding and who comes up with the ideas. Then data collection and labeling, because we need a lot of training data to train these large machine learning algorithms. Then training and testing. And finally, deployment and how this works in the real world. So let's start by research and funding. So who actually funds the research in the AI space? Well, historically and still now, it's a lot of military and intelligence agencies, specifically in the US. Here I've got a slide that shows the top contract spending on AI by US government agencies for 2021. And this means this is money that is spent for third-party development. So they're basically hiring other companies to do research and development in their, in their name. And the most spending is done by the Department of Defense, right? It basically outspends all of the other agencies, even though this was right in the middle of the pandemic, right? As you can see, the Department of Health and Human Services doesn't even get a fraction of that. And one of the companies that profits of this spending is Clearview AI. Clearview is a US-based company that sells access to biometric identification software to law enforcement agencies all over the world. And they basically have a product where you can give them a photo of a person and they will give you matching content, like other photos or more information about that person. And to create this product, they actually scraped more than 30 billion photographs from Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram without asking people for consent, right? And so you can imagine we're like 8 billion people on this planet, 30 billion photographs, that's a lot, right? And I don't want to know if they have some kind of party photo of me from my university days in there, so like not really nice to think about. The CEO of Clearview actually sees it a bit differently, because he says that all the information we collect is collected legally and it is all publicly available information. Well, yeah, as I said, if I'm, like I put a photo up on Facebook somewhere or didn't change the privacy settings so it's public, or I upload a photo on Twitter, I don't think a person should still have the right to just take it and do whatever they want with it, right? So there's no checks and no consent given here. Then secondly, when we talk about funding and research on AI technology, we need to talk about big tech, because they are buying everything. This is a slide that is not quite up to date anymore, I think. So it shows basically the big tech giants' billion-dollar acquisitions between 2000 and 2020. So only the companies they bought for at least $1 billion, right? So you can see LinkedIn and so on. And I think there's a few current ones missing. And what we can see here is that these tech giants are trying to build monopolies, essentially, right? And also go into markets that they historically haven't really focused on. And yeah, that is bad economically, but also in terms of research, because these tech giants increasingly also control research on notable AI systems or in which directions the research goes, as you can see on this slide. From Our World in Data, which I found quite fascinating. So we can see basically research on AI systems between 1950 and 2022. And about 2012, 2013 is where the spike goes up, essentially, is where the deep learning era started. And we can see that since then, so since like 2015, a lot of the research has been done by industry, whereas historically it's been done mostly by academia or in collaborations. And so for 2022, we almost all of the notable AI systems that they look at here have been built by industry players. And that is partly because these industry players, so the tech giants, have access to all the data and the compute resources, which are prohibitively expensive nowadays to build these giant models. Next, I want to look into data collection and labeling. And we can't really talk about this part without looking at ImageNet, which is was the image classification data set. Right? So basically, classification means you have an image of an object, for example, with a cat in it, and you want to make you want to teach the machine to realize that it's a cat on the image. And yeah, this is one of the most influential data sets in computer vision that's been created so far, with more than 14 million images in more than 20,000 categories. And the goal that the people who created it had was to map out the entire world of objects, which seems legit, right? Yeah. So where did the images actually come from? Well, the internet, right? So they went ahead and just scraped images from search engines and also photo sharing websites such as Flickr, and they essentially took everything that had a Creative Commons license. Well, did they ask people for consent? No, right? So they essentially treated everything that they found like a free-for-all buffet, and this is basically led to what I'm going to call the ImageNet mentality that we see today in generative AI, but also in the AI space as a whole, which is essentially scrape as if there's no tomorrow. So all the data you can get your hands on, everything that people are not keeping somewhere in a server rack in their basement, get it and try to build some machine learning model of it. And a popular example of this in the last year, especially in the generative AI space, has been Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is a generative image model which creates these beautiful images, or some of them are weird looking with like people with 6 fingers or something. And their model was created partially by pictures of artists that put their art up on DeviantArt, an art sharing website. And also, apparently, they used stock photos by Getty Images, which came out because people wanted to use Stable Diffusion to create images of footballers, and the Getty Image logo appeared on the images. So Getty Images and a few artists decided to sue, and we're going to see how that plays out because it's a precedent, essentially a legal precedent for copyright infringement. We don't know what the ruling's going to be, so this is quite exciting times when it comes to that. Yeah, but back to ImageNet, the data set. How were the images that they collected actually labeled? They did that based on WordNet. And WordNet is essentially was created at Princeton University in the 80s, and it's a hierarchical word database with nouns in it. So you would have like, I don't know, Homo sapiens, and then, I don't know, male, female, something like that, like categories, and cats and dogs and so on. And so they took these labels and they did their image search and scraped all the images that they could get. And then they needed someone to label these images, right? So they went ahead and became one of the biggest users of Amazon Mechanical Turk at that time. So MTurk is a website where people can essentially sign up and do little small tasks, like, for example, labeling an image, and get paid per task, a few cents for each image, essentially. And they did that for these 14 million images and published the resulting ImageNet dataset in 2009. So now, if you had one of these images in front of you of a person, right, I would like you to look at the following words and pick a label among them. Nice, right? So these are all terms, some of the most offensive terms in the person category of the ImageNet labels. I don't know what it says, wimp, spinster, closet queen, and so on, call girl, a lot of things that I wouldn't say. And essentially, what I'm asking myself is, first of all, why does a machine need to know what a call girl looks like? I don't really see the point of that. And also, when you give people the option to label images like that, you just get basically their worst stereotypes in image form, right? If you want to picture what a loser looks like, I think we all have an image of that because we're biased humans, right? But it's still very weird to actually get that into a training data set for machine learning models. Right, the next step in creating AI is training and testing. And there I want to look into gender shades, which is a landmark study from 2018 by Joy Buolamwini and Timnit Gebru, who investigated biases in commercial binary gender classification systems. Joy's work, you can see Joy here on the picture, Her work was inspired by her own experience of not being recognized by open source face detection software. So she actually had to wear this white mask so that the software recognized her face, whereas all her white co-workers and friends were actually recognized by the algorithm, right? And inspired by that, she looked into gender classification systems, right? Binary gender classification systems, which were on the market at that time. And here you can see the accuracies of these systems at first glance. So yeah, they all, some of them, 86% maybe isn't too good, right? Microsoft doing fairly well, then one might think, at first glance though, because what she did is she actually did what we call a subgroup analysis. And she took images of men and women with darker and lighter skin and actually looked into the results of the systems for these different subgroups. And what we can see here is that all the images of men with lighter skin are almost perfectly recognized by the algorithms, whereas those of women with darker skin are there's a much higher rate of failure there, right? So in one case, the IBM system only got 65.3% right. And you need to think about that this is a binary classification problem, right? So if I throw a coin, then I'm 50% right. So this is not great, right? So what this tells us, one thing it tells us is that a single success metric does not really tell the whole story, especially if it's just an average over the whole data set. And Bolamwini's and Gebru's work motivated many other researchers to assess biases and to try to build fairer systems. And one of the outcomes of this was the diversity in faces dataset, which was created by IBM with the goal of advancing the accuracy and fairness in facial recognition. And the way that they did that was they went ahead and scraped images, as usual, and they let people annotate them with, for instance, how far are your eyes apart, how long is your nose, I don't know, all these different data points, and also perceived age, race, and binary gender. And the reason behind this was that the measurements would allow for better assessment of accuracy and fairness, and to also have a larger variety of facial diversity. But what I'm asking myself in this context is whether diversity really just means that you have a large variety of face shapes, or whether diversity just means you have like binary gender encoded in your systems, which is not self-determined by the people who are actually on the picture, but determined by someone else who's looking at the picture and labeling it, right? And where I'm getting at with this is that the AI creators actually decide about the classification system, right? They decide about the boxes that the person who's labeling these images is allowed to put them in, right? And how many boxes there are and where they start and end and so on. And what this does is perfectly summarized by Kate Crawford in her book Atlas of AI. The practice of classification is centralizing power. The power to decide which differences make a difference. Right, and with that, I want to get to the deployment phase. I had to shorten this quite a bit, so I'm just going to go into like some not so recent and some more recent examples of what actually went wrong with the deployment of algorithms that make decisions about people's lives. So what could possibly go wrong, right? In 2015, Amazon created a recruiting algorithm which essentially scanned people's, or was trained on people's CVs of the workforce of the past 10 years. Well, surprise, tech workforce, right? You might know the problem. Most of them were men, so the system decided, well, not decided, but it essentially discriminated against women, right? They tried to fix it, they couldn't, and then they scrapped it in the end, which is a great decision, but I read last year that Amazon actually is now firing people algorithmically, which is maybe also not great, right? Yeah, then another thing that some of you might have heard of Google Photos, also in 2015, tagged images of black people as gorillas. And one guy made this public, so Google had to react to it, and they were like, okay, we're going to fix this by just blocking the search terms related with monkeys, right? So you could not effectively look for gorilla and get any results, right? And Wired, so the magazine Wired, actually reported in 2018, so 3 years later, that this was still the case. So that was their fix. That was it, right? Cool, right? Google, come on. Yeah, something more recent. So some of you might have tried out the Lensa app. It was basically very popular, I think, in November of last year. That was this app where you can give them a picture and it will create like stylized avatars of that image or of your face. But it turned out that it produced overly sexualized images of women who wanted to create these avatars, right? And this Lensa app is actually based on Stable Diffusion, the model that I've been talking about earlier. Yeah, that is based on stolen art. So then another relatively recent example is Bing's AI, right? All of us, I guess, forgot about Bing before February of this year. And then suddenly it became very popular again because it's behind the scenes using OpenAI's GPT-4 system. And people were using it, and they just put it out in the open, and basically using people as beta testers, and it became offensive towards users and told them that they were delusional. So I found this tweet of this guy who was basically asking it whether, I think Avatar 2 was showing nearby, and since the training data only includes data up until last year, Bing told it, no, Avatar is not showing until 2023. And the user was like, yeah, but it is 2023. No, it's not. How dare you question me, human, right? So there's a ton of that going on, and the fix that Microsoft actually put in first was that it limited the amount of conversation ping pong you could have to 5 answers, essentially, right? And then your conversation would end. Not so great. I think they increased it by now. I'm not sure what else they've done. Maybe block some search terms. I don't know. And then the last example I want to give is the city of Rotterdam actually had an algorithm developed that was supposed to predict who should be investigated for benefit fraud, right? And there's a really great article, like the data storytelling on this article is just mwah. It's very, very beautiful. But the story is not, because the system turns out the system discriminates by ethnicity and gender using proxy variables. And its predictions are also not better than random guessing. So, well, not really useful for anything. And there's a topic that gets a lot of attention nowadays because AI is being so popularized, and I think people even outside of the tech space know quite a bit about it now because of this explosion in generative AI. And there's a lot of talk about fairness. So how can we actually make these systems fair, right? And I want to just look at a little scenario to show that it's not actually that straightforward. So imagine you had to build a fair IT hiring algorithm, right? You basically have 10 open positions to fill, and you have 25 candidates in 2 groups. The circles are the female group. The triangles are the male group. Sorry for the binary. I know the world is more complex, but that would just blow up my time right now if I took more groups into this. And the little hats show that the person has some kind of qualification, like, I don't know, a bachelor's degree in computer science or something like that. Yeah, so now let's try to build a fair system. The first fairness metric that we can look at is demographic parity, right? That means that the probability to get hired should be approximately equal for both groups, so for men and women. So we could draw this line around it and say, okay, that's now fair because, you know, half-half, right? But some of you might look at this and say, well, but now there's like people that are apparently not very qualified for this position, so maybe that's not really fair to them, right? You could say, okay, well, fair point. Maybe we should take qualification into the equation. And And then we can look at the second metric, which is equal opportunity, right? So the probability to get hired should be approximately equal for both groups, given that the individuals are qualified. Well, we could draw this line and say, well, now, 1 out of 1 qualified women, so 100% are in there, that's great, and 9 out of 10 qualified men. So that's 90%, that's as good as we can do it with filling these 10 positions only. Well, this is not supposed to be a sociology lesson, but there's different, what we call base rates of qualification in both groups, right? So for instance, women are generally underrepresented in tech, and they also get access to computers later in life. So also less of them do actually have these qualifications, right? And then only already privileged people get the job, so this might not really seem fair. And also a degree or prior experience might not be a neutral indicator of who's actually qualified for a job, right? So, well, maybe we should look at a different metric, at affirmative action, which basically says there must be a 50-50 split between the groups after hiring, right? You can say, okay, let's draw this line around it. We have 10 positions, but we can only fill 8 of them because there's only 4 women in here. So that's fair enough, right? Now, someone might point out that, again, we're hiring unqualified women, and now quite a lot of them in favor of more qualified men, which might seem unfair. But even if you believe that this is a good fairness metric, and you should get more women that don't have a bachelor's degree in IT into the workforce, then you might ask yourself, how would these women fare in an environment that is not welcoming for them, maybe? And also they might be seen as tokens, so like their skills might actually be questioned the whole time. So yeah, all in all, which of these metrics is actually fair, right? Is it demographic parity, or equal opportunity, or affirmative action, or one of the gazillion other ones that exist out there? What I'm getting at is that fairness is actually a political decision, right? It cannot be simply formalized using like a checkpoint or checklist approach. And it's also very context specific. And people have very different ideas on what fairness is, and they fight about it constantly. So let's not outsource these political decisions only to the few select people developing AI systems, and I include myself in that, right? And now I have about 5 minutes left, and I have to decide whether I want to show you the longer or the shorter ending. So do you have lots of questions, or do you want to hear me brabbling on a bit more? Okay. Again? Okay, I'll brabble on. But before that, I show you the AI feedback poops because I'm very proud of this graphic design. So this was my first ending, but due to popular request, I'm going to dive a bit deeper and show you the iceberg, right? So icebergs are usually used because you want to show that what you see above basically the ocean is not really all what's there, right? Because even though I've heard that there's very differently shaped icebergs, apparently, and this metaphor doesn't always work, but yeah. So when we talk about fairness, right, I've showed you the example, and there's a few, I'm just gonna show all of them now. There's a few different things that are fairly obvious to people, I say fairly obvious to people that work in the machine learning space, right? For example, the collisions and the fairness metrics that I've discussed, and also who should decide what fairness actually is, right? And then there's also this thing with group-based versus individual fairness. So only because I belong to a certain group, like female, for instance, should I be treated differently to someone that is very similar to me but is in a different group, such as male, right? That might be a conflict. And then there's also an accuracy and fairness trade-off, right? So basically the performance metric you're trying to get at or you're trying to improve with your model might actually get worse when you increase fairness. This is also something that people do a lot of inquiry about in the sciences. And then there's the bias in training data, right, which is really hard to get rid of, right? But then when we look below the surface, and I'm also going to try to be real quick here, there's so-called proxy variables, what I've briefly mentioned earlier in Rotterdam. So you can sometimes guess someone's gender, for instance, or ethnicity without actually explicitly knowing the ethnicity. For instance, in the US, you can use zip codes to very pinpoint someone's ethnicity or race, right? And use that, and so your model becomes biased because of that. Then fairness, we have a lot of cases where we have actually no ground truth in production, so we don't know whether a model is actually being fair or not, or whether it's being more unfair than when we trained it. For example, when you're predicting whether someone's going to default on a loan, you won't know until like a few years later. That's also a problem. Then we have this thing called data or concept drift, which essentially you can imagine that during the pandemic, for instance, which was a very sudden change that happened, suddenly people started buying leggings and jogging pants like crazy, right? Nobody was predicting that, so people went out of stock, right? So this is something that we could call a drift, right? Then we have problems with data privacy versus fairness, right? So if we want to assess whether we have a certain case of unfairness, right? We need to know what group a person belongs to, but maybe we also don't want to have them disclose that because we care about privacy. So this is an inherent conflict. Then one question that doesn't get asked enough, in my opinion, is whether an algorithmic solution to tackling a problem is even possible or appropriate, like predicting whether someone's a criminal from a picture, right? Ding, 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 you should think about this word cloud that I showed you earlier with like stereotyping and so on. And then when we talk about business terms, is fairness even business relevant for the people that you work for as a machine learning engineer? And some people might decide it's not, so that can also produce conflicts. Then fairness metrics, like the ones that I've shown you, are these even understandable for those affected? Because if we now go ahead and say, okay, we put in some laws that require companies to disclose how unfair or fair their systems are, will people even know what that means, right? And will it be meaningful to them? Then is, as a next step, an appeal against the algorithmic decision possible? So if, for example, I apply for a job and an algorithm sorts out my CV, can I say, look, can this be shown to a human because I'm clearly qualified, right? Next, one thing that I take a lot of issues with, as you might have noticed, is that there's no consent regarding the data collection from data subjects. And another thing is that there's some boxes or some categories that we use in machine learning quite a lot, which are not very clearly definable, right? Or even impossible to define, such as gender identity or sexual orientation, right? There's no clear boxes here. And then labels that people give or put on certain images, for instance, contain the worldview and biases of the annotator, but also of the people who've actually created the boxes that they allow to annotate, right? Then, that's my favorite one, neo-colonial aspects of the tech industry, right? The backbone of AI, as we know it now, is built essentially on gig workers, right? Gig workers that are labeling the images and, getting resources to build our hardware and so on. And so most of the big tech firms actually sit in the global north, whereas most of these people sit in the global south, and they're getting not the fat end of the stick, right? And then this actually cements existing power structures, and also through these monopolies that I've shown you in the beginning that these tech companies are building. And finally, also regarding fairness, what's difficult to capture is actually that the world changes, right? Which is related to this drift that I've been talking about. But if, for instance, you look at pictures from like the 1950s in Hamburg, you will, or like at lunchtime or something, you will see only men walking around because only men used to work, right? And things have changed quite drastically since that time, so we can only try to extrapolate what the world will look like in 20, 30 years. And this is very difficult to deal with. So let's get to an end. Before Zamina will hopefully tell us like some better solutions to the problems that I've been pointing out, I want to give you just some small advice, right? Advice for everyone is essentially to stay informed, right? Don't fall for the AI hype and it's gonna take over the world and so on. Also consume critical media. And join and organize collectives, right? So there's a few very great organizations that do great advocacy work in this space. For instance, Algorithm Watch, which is a German NGO, German and Swiss, and EDRI, which is a European digital rights initiative. And these two, among others, have been doing some very great lobbying, for instance, for good measures to be put in the AI Act, right? For instance, so that we don't get biometric mass surveillance, right? Nobody wants that. And then donate to these organizations if you can, and also vote for people that actually care about privacy and digital rights and putting laws into place that will basically try to get big tech to not take over the world. And then advice for people working in machine learning space, be critical about your results, but also about other people's result. Not every archive paper is a good thing, right? Not all of the benchmarks that we use are capturing the world as it is, right? And then secondly, it should be moral first and math second, right? You should try to identify harms that your system, or that the system that you're potentially building could have, and identify the consequences before you actually formalize something such as a fairness metric. And then finally, and that's very important, involve other humans, people that have nothing to do with the tech industry, preferably, because people that are affected by the system should have a say in how they're developed, right? Because they're the first that are gonna feel the consequences. And also, we should talk more to social scientists, because they've got a long history of doing qualitative work, which computer scientists are not very great at. And yeah, with that, I say thank you. And if you want to get in touch, just take a picture of one of these. Thanks very much.
So, thank you so much. I want to open up for first a space here open up, and then I open up for questions if you have some of those. So we could take about 10 minutes, and if we have more, of course, we have some time for networking afterwards. So if you have questions, feel free to raise them. I would have one beforehand, and that's like, what if I get in the, or meet my coworkers tomorrow, and they ask me, hey Daniel, how was this AI meetup? And I want to give them one actionable advice from your talk. What should I tell them? I don't work in AI, so.
Okay. Well, actually, that would really depend on what kind of people they are, what their interests are, and so on. So tech people. Okay. Then I would say don't believe the hype, please. Don't believe all the hype that you read about AGI, so artificial general intelligence. This idea that there's going to be some kind of godlike machine with that's very intelligent and so on around the corner. I've said that at the last meetup. I think this idea that AGI is possible is actually a value judgment, right? It's whether you want to believe in it or not. It's not actually something that can be scientifically proven, because we have no scientific falsifiable definition of what AGI means, right? And on top of that, we also don't have a very great definition of what intelligence means. So, so yeah, don't fall for the hype. Also read critical voices. And if you want to get some links, let me know. I've also got some in the slides, and I can share them afterwards in the meetup group.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. More questions?
So you mentioned that you're also working as a consultant. So I was wondering if you could maybe share an anecdote where you faced a problem of fairness while working for a client, maybe without exposing the client, but yeah, how you went about it and yeah, what was your experience?
To be fair, I can't actually. I guess lucky for me, and also I guess I haven't been working in the space long enough professionally, and right now my focus is on data engineering, so this thinking about this stuff comes a little bit afterwards, but we do think a lot about privacy, I assure you. So data privacy is one thing, but one thing that I can tell, which is something that I sought out, was trying to do, I've been talking about this gender shades thing where they did the subgroup analysis, lighter skinned female, darker skinned males and so on. And I did a university project where I tried to do something similar for an emotion recognition system. And the results were about the same. So this is a problem that is very rampant. And also, I guess, in the industry, as soon as you deal with data that concerns people, always look into subgroup analysis. That's one of the first things I would do. And look into your data. Try to get the best data you possibly can.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Less of a question, more of a comment. You mentioned, people getting arrested, sort of by AI in the USA, which always, the USA always seems like the worst case scenario of any new technology and very far away. But right here in Hamburg, next month, I believe, at Hansaplatz, the police will start using AI to monitor that area, which they already have 24 surveillance cameras there, plus a police station right across the street, making me think that maybe surveillance isn't the actual issue. But this is happening in Hamburg right now as well.
A very, very fair point. And also, if you think about the location, Hansaplatz, right, it also goes to show it's not Eppendorf, right? It's not Blankenese, where they put up the cameras first, where they have this police station right there, but they're actually looking at people that are essentially in the social hierarchy far below those people living in Blankenese, right? And so this is also something that I worry about a lot, that AI is now being used as this sort of blanket excuse for safety reasons. We should just, do biometric mass surveillance everywhere. And hopefully, my hope is that the AI Act, so this regulation framework that the EU is coming up with or has proposed, the first proposal was in 2021. Last week, on Wednesday, the Parliament voted on the draft, and now they're going into negotiations till the end of the year with the Council. And let's hope that they're not going to water this document down more, because actually what they're trying to do is really to ban biometric mass surveillance and a few other things, and how they classify risk in systems and so on. I'm not going to get into detail about that, but it would be best for us to not have a surveillance state. So. For the stream, the question was whether there's a platform somewhere with like a list or a map or something of biometric surveillance systems and other systems like that, whether I know of something like that. No, actually, but I would look into Chaos Computer Club, because, that's what they do, right? They always have great resources like that, and yeah.
Okay, shall we do a break? Yes, then let's do a break for about 10 minutes, and then afterwards we have a talk by Zamina. Mach das einfach unten aus. Ja.
Oder wenn es halt mal ja, und dass sie halt auch meiste Research mittlerweile Millionen von Dollar sind. Ja, klar, desto besser kannst du dich dann halt auch vielleicht ja klar, sicher. Wenn der Laden größer ist und der nicht so organisiert ist, dass du halt wirklich auch Entscheidungsgewalt ganz irgendwie gibst. Ja. Dann trotzdem das Gemeinde bei uns ist das so, dass wir viel Entscheidungsfreiheit haben. Aber wir sind halt nicht das Ziel, aber die wissen auch nicht, was passiert da unten. Und wir trotzdem ein Modell haben, wo ihr euch selbst Ziele steckt und eigene Ziele.
wissen halt, also es ist sehr international, was da kommuniziert wird. Dementsprechend gibt es halt auch Leute, die das schaffen. Der Laden ist halt einfach so sehr sozial, es gibt jetzt auch nicht unbedingt vergessen, aber dass jemand sagt, so, ja, stecken wir hier an. Also mal gucken, was wir mit dem machen.
Das gleiche hat auch noch von Kollege zu Kollege passiert.
Aber selbst das passiert halt manchmal, aber du merkst so, das ist halt einfach eine andere Mentalität, dann macht es halt auch nicht mehr Sinn. Das kann man halt einfach so machen.
Meine Wahlbeteiligung steht im Stoff, das heißt, ich habe auch lieber zusammen das auswerten. Und dann meine Mutter morgens um 10 ist das Film, vielleicht die Hälfte der Fälle und dann muss er nichts, dann ist er nicht so lange wieder weg und so. Dann später. Hat dann natürlich schon vorher gearbeitet. Ja, die sind Kenner. Ich glaube, das ist Step und wir haben auch ein paar Yoga gemacht. Ja, schon ein bisschen Yoga gemacht. Aber das ist immer schwer, das anzusprechen dann. Ich habe auch eine Gardine gebaut, das hier bei und es war halt schon 9 Uhr morgens und dann macht er erst 3 Stunden und dann ist er vorbei. Und dann irgendwie auf dem Boot gedauert zu organisieren. Ja, das habe ich auch nicht. Ja, okay. Ich nehme mein
Kannst du schon zu mehr fragen, wenn er keinen Bock drauf hat.
Geil. Ja, wenigstens. Ja, das ist auf jeden Fall gezogen. Ich bin nie es war schon wie so ein Meme, dass sie irgendwie immer so auf dem Boden nach ist, war irgendwann auch nie ein Festival. Das war mega sauber. Ja, genau. Es kann auch ganz nach hinten losgehen. Ich habe mich jetzt so durch den Boden, wurde zweimal nicht kontrolliert, haben in Hamburg an, auf Deutsche Bahn gegangen, Ticket schon wieder, Rückerstattung bekommen, also direkt 25 € bezahlt. Der Schwabe voll Tisch. Das war die geile. Das war mir echt gefreut, das war ultra voll. Und ich dachte so, das ist nicht das Bahnhof, was ich so voll habe. Da habe ich kontrolliert, wurde perfekt. Dafür, dass ich auf dem Boden sitzen musste, hin und her und so weiter, aber kein Sitzplatz war schon voll genug. Es war überbucht alles. Aber kein ja, ich habe auch mit ausgespielt. Das ist doch gut, dass alles Spaß hat. Ich glaube, so viel musst du darüber auslegen. Das ist so. Der Mann des Schweigens ist über diese zwei spezifischen Abende. Alles gut. Das Kollegen war so in etwa war, glaube ich, dann wirklich das Motto. Das war schon. Aber das merkt, dass wir auch direkt die von Mittwoch bis Sonntag also, einmal irgendwie überzeugend. Ich kann überzeugen. Ja, genau. Also, wir haben ja 3 Tage schon Geburtstag vorgefeiert theoretisch und dann erst dann weil ich bin ja nur den Feiertagen mit drin. Also es war wirklich so das höchste Gefühl, so alle 2 Monate mal feiern gehen oder so. Und das stehe ich halt wirklich vor der Welt. Deswegen ich habe mich noch daran erinnert. SDC wurde was entdeckt. Also deswegen war das für mich so, wann war ich das letzte Mal wirklich so 4 Tage feiern oder habe 2 Tage hintereinander Alkohol getrunken. Wie lange hast du jetzt gebraucht, dich davon zu erholen? Überraschend ging das echt gut. Es war wirklich sehr überraschend. Also mein Körper hat was echt Bock drauf. Das hat mich wirklich überrascht. Weil ich war eigentlich eher Team Festival machen wir nicht. Davon brauche ich erst 2 Wochen Erholung. Aber jetzt bin ich auch wieder okay. Ich bin ja jetzt 29. Ticket für die Flüge schon gebucht. Der Team ist denn jetzt auch. Ja, genau. Ein oder 2 Monate. Ich habe irgendwas im Kopf, dass das demnächst irgendwie. Ja, dann ist es andersrum. Ich gehe nämlich auf die 4. Die ist, glaube ich, übernächsten Monat. Das ist eine Runde. Ja, Ja, Millis. Dann ist das andere Ende Juni. Ja, Juni ist das schon bald. Das ist 20. Juni jetzt, ne? Ja, Juni. Also Juni ist und ich glaube Ende Juni ist, ja, ist das wahrscheinlich. Aber da bin ich mal gespannt, was du da erzählst. Weil ich glaube, Fusion ist nochmal eine ganz andere Sache. Ja. Weiß ich auch nicht, ob wir das erzählen haben. Fusion finde ich das geil in Location. Ja, das ist direkt am See. Das ist ein riesengroßen Kohlenförderbagger. Ach geil, das ist ja wie Splash. Okay, Splash hat glaube ich keinen See, aber ist auch so ein riesen Bagger. Das auch geil. Aber bist du natürlich ja. Wollen wir gleich weitermachen oder was?
Ich glaube, wir sollten mal weitermachen. Der Livestream, also du bist gerade im Livestream, oder?
Achso, ja. Das wollte ich wissen, ja. Ich grüße meine Mama.
Also es geht gerade hart auf deine Stimme, deswegen sehen wir alle gerade.
Es ist an schon, also
Das
hören
ist
jetzt
schon.
alle, was ich sage?
Ja, ich kann es auch ausmachen. Also du kannst einmal draufdrücken und wird's aus.
Ist doch, jetzt geht doch jetzt eh los, oder?
Ja,
Geht es denn so?
das geht so. Das ist gut.
Ich will das nämlich nicht festhalten, ehrlich
Das ist okay,
gesagt.
das ist fein. Also wenn du es anklippst, ist es okay. Du kannst es gerne so seitlich anklipsen. Zum Beispiel hier. Das ist fein. Ja. Okay.
So?
Yes.
Ja. Immer. Meiner ist sehr kürzer. Meiner ist kürzer und anders. Eher so actionable. Was soll ich jetzt tun? Aber mal gucken. Schönes Hintergrundbild. Ja,
Oder willst du direkt starten? Nein.
ist mir egal. Können wir beides. Also.
Aber das ist das andere. kein Mikrofon.
Wer hat kein Mikrofon? Du hast ein Mikrofon.
Jetzt hätte ich gerne.
Ja, stimmt. Ja. Aber so ein Ding oder so, ne?
Ja, es bräuchte sowas.
Ja.
So, let's continue. Da-dum, da-dum. People are getting in. The last ones are getting in, perfect. So we will have our last talk for today, which is by Zamina. She's the CEO from Shades and Contrast, and we'll talk about how to develop unbiased and useful stuff, or AI. And I'm particularly interested in the useful stuff because I work in blockchain for 2 years now, so it's sometimes foreign for us what's useful. So the stage is yours. Give a round of applause for Zamina.
Okay, so welcome to the second talk, how to develop useful and unbiased AI. And this presentation starts with a little exercise, so please stand up. Okay, this exercise is for you to demonstrate how algorithms are working, so the functionality of the algorithm. I chose an algorithm. I will tell you later which one it is. I chose 3 parameters, and we will sit down after one parameter. And side comment, I know nothing about you, about your personal data or anything, so I don't know what the result is. Okay, let's start. You can now sit down when you are older than 38. Okay. The second parameter is you can now sit down when you identify yourself as male. Okay. Only ladies, sorry. So the last parameter is you can now sit down when you have no children. Let's see. Anyone standing? No, right? Okay, good. Okay, thank you. So if we have one person still standing, I would have tell her that she should never go to the Netherlands. Why the Netherlands? The city of Rotterdam, we have seen it in the presentation before, is using an algorithm for social welfare benefits. So in Europe, you know, when you are sick or jobless, you go to the state, you go to a social worker, and you get money for your living. The city of Rotterdam said, okay, we will support the social workers with an algorithm. And this algorithm gives me a prediction, yeah, okay, this person can get money. No, this person shouldn't get money. In the end, the social worker is still deciding if the person is getting money, but the result is that it's discriminating young women. Because young women are, yeah, okay, she will never make it. That's really problematic, and we have seen that in the talk before. But the good part is digitalization in the German public sector is not so far, so we will not have that problem here. So let's move on to the happy life of consumer good. Hey Alexa, are you sexist or racist? Alexa is, if you ever have noticed it, not recognizing the voices equally. Why? Alexa is trained mainly with male voices from English native-speaking persons. So in the results in the US, it was discriminating and not recognizing different dialects and also female voices because they have different frequencies. We call this one the selection bias because the algorithm is very selective about the voices. But there are more biases. For example, in this e-commerce shop. In this e-commerce shop, there's an algorithm which predicts my customer behavior. And it knows, okay, I clicked on this washing machine. And you only know, okay, she's buying washing machines, so I predict the future, she will always buy washing machines. So this bias you can call also confirmation bias, because the algorithm is looking for confirming this customer behavior. I'm Zamina, by the way, and I started my professional career 2010 as analyst when I analyzed data mainly for customer behavior. And since 2017, I'm product manager mainly for algorithms because of my analytics background. Since 2022, I'm driving diversity and inclusion in product management with my company Shades and Contrast. What's with the birds? Okay, let's start from scratch. What is AI? AI is super hyped at the moment, so let's start with a general definition. AI is actually any intelligent machine which can perform human tasks. That's a general common description about AI. AI has different subfields. So there is machine learning and deep learning. There is computer vision, which is referring to image data. Then we have natural language processing, which is the functionality of ChatGPT. And we have robotics, when you put software into a physical product and it can act. So if you see that different subfields, you can say AI is focusing on different abilities. So the AI can analyze, the AI can recognize something, the AI can speak, or the AI can act. There are different examples about how to implement that. So machine learning, deep learning, we have that already in place in many, for example, online shops with personalization or dynamic pricing. In computer vision, data is mainly used in the autonomous driving industry or in augmented and virtual reality. We have the natural language processing in chatbots, ChatGPT, and we have robotics in manufacturing and service. So now, when is AI useful? Useful is something when it creates impact with a competitive advantage. So it creates value. Value for your customer, value for your company. So value is very dependent on what goal you have with your company. So the first action item to create something useful, be clear on what goal you want to achieve. The goals with AI can be summarized in 3 main goals. The first goal is that you can increase efficiency with AI, because you can automate repeating tasks. With that, you can reduce workload, reduce your time to completion. So, for example, you can use AI in resources to scan CVs, for example, or AI in marketing and sales to predict campaigns or to personalize it. So you can achieve up to 40% of productivity improvement with increasing efficiency. The second goal with AI you can achieve is reducing costs. So AI is able to do some things which we are not able to do. So for example, analyzing large amounts of data and calculating a forecast on demand prediction on it. Or it's also reducing errors. So example, in the manufacturing industry, or imagine wind turbines, they are always down. So you can put the sensor data of these wind turbines into an algorithm and predict when is the possibility that it's downtime again. So with that, you can reduce the downtime to up to 25% in this industry. And the third goal is that you can enhance your customer experience. So you can use AI and data, big data, to personalize your offerings. You can also support customer support with chatbots, and you can offer 24/7 availability. With that, you can increase your customer satisfaction even up to 50%, depending on the industry. So that's the goal behind being useful with AI. So how do we come to that? How are we developing useful AI? The step 1 is that you should identify your starting point. Because with AI, you should ask yourself, are we talking about an old problem and there is currently a manual solution? Is there something like a software already in place, but I'm not satisfied with that software? Or are we talking about innovation? So a new problem and we need a new solution. Let's pick that one with a manual solution. You have an old problem and you do it manually at the moment. So for example, dynamic pricing. You are not doing it automatically, someone is doing it in your company and adapting the prices by season or whatever. So you should ask mainly three types of questions. And behind these questions, there are actually categories. So first of all, you should identify the impact. So is it a high workload problem? Then second one, what is the automation behind it? Does it still require human interaction if you have that solution in place? And third point is, how feasible is it? Is the needed data really available to implement that solution? You can dig deeper into it, and for that I recommend something like a product canvas. That is an example from one of my latest projects where we used an AI canvas. So we described the status quo, understanding the customer, understanding the user, what are the pain points, what is an alternative to AI. Then you ideate and describe your solution, and then you describe the future. So how much human interaction is still needed there, and you can clarify very good what are you talking about, which idea. Step 2 is that you should score your potentials. So example is you have many ideas in place in your company, you have many AI ideas, but also other solutions. This one is an example for a chatbot, and this is just an example for a scorecard where you can say, okay, we have an existing solution, this is a call center, but we want to have an impact on reducing the cost, increasing customer satisfaction, and then you can score your potential, and in the end you can rank it against your other ideas. So in this case, the other example, the dynamic pricing, you can see on the value effort matrix, okay, dynamic pricing is much more high effort, but almost the same value, and chatbot is much easier to develop, so you should go for the chatbot, of course. That's an easy way to rank your different ideas. Then step 3, and that's very important for AI and data products in general. You should get your data ready before you start developing. So you should ask yourself, which data sources do you really want to put in? So I have general action tips because it's very specific from solution to solution what data you should get into it. So first of all, consider current data storages. I have seen many companies who say, okay, no, that's an old data warehouse, we don't want to use that data. But no, use that, it's really valuable. Then don't get fancy. It often happens when you start developing AI products, management or anyone says, okay, we want this fancy reporting tool right now, let's do it with the AI product development. No. Right? It's not about fancy reports now. Be pragmatic. Then maybe you have data and they are not digitalized yet. Maybe there is a reason for that. So don't try to force everything to be digitalized. When it's not digitized now, there is a reason behind it. And then, last but not least, consider different data sources. This is very important to increase the quality of what output you are generating in the end and you are developing. So this is how you get to useful AI or data products. You identify your starting point, you score your potential, and you get your data ready before you do the product development. Now, let's go to the bias part. How does bias now get into the data? Anyone knows?
Starts with the data collection.
Again?
It starts with the data collection. The data
Starts
you
with
collect
the
is a subset of all data available in the world. So you have made a selection, consciously or indirectly. Just like if you take fixed phone numbers, you just get older people in your data set.
Yeah, it starts with the data selection, yeah. More? Yeah?
I think most of the people who work on AI and build AI are mostly male, white, from the northern hemisphere. When you have like
So lack of diversity in the teams, more.
Also regarding data collection, if you have like labeled data by humans, you incorporate the bias of the humans that label the data.
Yeah.
It's also a resolution problem. Like you cannot model everything how it is in the real world.
Cannot model everything in the real world, yeah.
I would also say it starts with data production. Not everybody is hooked equally to the data, to the internet. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, we are in Germany, but other countries are not. And also, some people are not even allowed to use
Yeah.
devices. Because their husband doesn't allow them or something. Or they don't have devices. But yeah, so.
Data production is a part, yeah. Maybe one last, yeah.
The data is already biased. There is no unbiased data set.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's all true, and I will not go into every one of them because there are so many reasons why data is already biased. And yeah, the last one is the one which I start with. There is already real-world discrimination. So we are not living in an equal world. So the data is just reflecting where we are living. So I have one example, which is a salary prediction. So you all know about the gender pay gap, and if you want to now develop a prediction for your company, a salary prediction, the algorithm would just say, okay, there's a gender pay gap, yeah, so I pay women less. That's something which we are fighting against, but the algorithm doesn't know. So you have to give the algorithm some information that you don't want that in your algorithm. So one mitigation strategy to reduce that is to normalize these data or to put out the fact that there is gender in it. So you can reduce that, and then the algorithm will not discriminate or will discriminate less. Yeah. Then second reason why is a bias in the data is limited data. We have not so much data available that AI is equally treating everyone. And the example which I show you is now the one which is the inspiration for this whole talk, because it is in the autonomous driving industry where I have one project and we are developing software for self-driving cars. And they said to me in many meetings, we need data diversity, we need data diversity. What does it mean? It means they only have images a day at the moment. They don't have images with rain, they miss snow, so and so. And so what does it mean? The car will not recognize snow or other behavior or situations. So you have to feed a lot of data into that AI. So what is the solution? The solution is that you should increase the data diversity, and their solution is that they are driving around now in Germany and also in Asia to increase different traffic signs, for example, and capture all these data to feed this algorithm. The second solution is, because you will never achieve that you get all this amount of data for every situation, is that they are having another AI which is creating synthetic data. So they are feeding the algorithm with synthetic situations, so the algorithm knows, okay, that's low light, that's sunlight, that's an accident. That's the second reason. And the third reason is something which we cannot predict. So it can also happen that the algorithm is putting a bias into it, which we don't know. We call that algorithmic bias. So that's really hard to explain, but I tried with a very simple example, is that imagine we want to build a translation or text tool. And I put in job functionalities. And this job functionalities, doctors are always male and nurses are always female. If you put that into that algorithm, the algorithm will not understand, or will even say, yeah, okay, doctors are always male. It's not, it cannot be the year of 2023. It cannot be that the doctor is female. So the algorithm will take a result out of that, and you have to classify the input variables and tell the algorithm, okay, there is no correlation between gender and functionality, although it's in our data. that's the third reason for bias. Now, how do we reduce bias? It's very hard, but when you develop AI products, it's very important that you have a large amount of data, and in that data you have a strong data diversity. Then consider different data sources will also increase the quality of your algorithm. Then you can also pre or post-process this data, so debias it with different statistical methods in advance. Maybe you know it. For example, gender and jobs are not correlated, or you know it not in advance, then you do it afterwards. And last, you should test different models when you develop AI, because one algorithm will maybe strengthen the bias, another one will not do it. So you should test different models against each other. You can find, if you Google that, statistical cheat sheets which are differentiating between statistical bias and also ethical bias, and then describe, okay, what's the problem in my model, what's the consequence with it, and how can I reduce that risk. You can Google that one. You can also take pictures now. But I think this list is not complete. There are even more biases out there. So I will try to make my own list and publish it also on the website. So last point, tips to maximize AI success is that you should be clear on your goals. Data is key for AI. Be committed to time and budget, because it takes time to test different models. And build a diverse team, because a diverse team is much more sensitive to such bias and challenges in data. So actions for useful and unbiased AI is, I would recommend anyone to use an AI canvas, business model canvas, or whatsoever, where you describe the value. AI is now a hype, but we want to develop useful things which create value. And second point, use a statistical cheat sheet. Look at the list of bias which are out there and try to mitigate that with statistical methods, even if it's not always the case, but we can reduce it, and we are also in the responsibility to do so. And last but not least, follow Shades and Contours. We publish very often AI canvas and also cheat sheets about it. You can find us on LinkedIn and also Instagram. That's it.
Thank you so much. Again, we will open up for questions for the next 10 minutes. There's already one. I just wanted to mention, if you want to share it, like the canvas and so on, we can post it in our meetup group.
Yeah.
So everyone can access it. I guess that's a good idea. Let's just check afterwards.
Cool.
And questions. I guess you were first. Presentation? If you want to share,
yeah, sure. Yeah.
What's a realistic time frame if you start from scratch?
Developing
what is the realistic time frame
data
to
or AI product?
Yeah, if you want do an AI product.
2 weeks, no. I think even 3 months are too not realistic. I think 6 months for training, testing, data collection is quite sporty, I would say. I'm looking into the experience of other and see nodding. 6 months is sporty. That's the minimum, I think. Yeah.
It depends on what you want to solve, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to give an absolute
Hard.
answer to that.
Yeah, yeah.
You talked about on step 3 getting your data ready, about don't digitalize
everything.
everything.
Yeah.
So could you explain on that a little? Why?
So that means that I think the digitalization is very far in Germany, and if you, depending on the industry, so to say, but in many companies so my expectation is, when you are as a company now thinking about developing AI products, then you should be very far in digitalizing other things, because otherwise you have different problems, I would say. And so if you develop AI and consider different data sources, you should consider different data sources. You will for sure find a data source which is maybe not digitalized or is not stored. Maybe there's a reason. For example, very sensitive data. Speaking of a medicine sector, maybe you are not allowed to store it so long. Maybe you shouldn't use that. So there's always a reason behind data which is not digitalized yet. Mm-hmm. No?
When you have created your product and you have your AI model ready, and you find out that there is a bias in that model and that product, do you see any strategies or any chances to retroactively repair that model, or do you just have to throw it away and train it again with better data or an unbiased data or whatever? Yeah, so can you repair it?
Depending on how big the problem is, right? In the talk before, we have seen that there was a example that you just throw it away, but I think there are more strategies before that. So you can put in more data sources, because maybe the data source is biased, and you can feed that algorithm with more data and see what's happening. You can train another model and see what is the result. And you can maybe post-process data, but that's maybe a lot of effort. So
but to tweak it deterministically is a hard thing to do, right? So because you don't really know what's going on under the hood. So the strategies that you mentioned are bring more data in or train another model. But is there any way to analyze where it goes wrong, where it takes a wrong turn, or is it just visible in the results?
Yeah.
I would say it depends on the model, if it's easy to interpret or not. But regarding the question, if you are able to reuse a model, I would say it's possible to fine-tune the model using additional data sets. So you could reuse some of the computation that you invested into that model.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's because sometimes it's like a black box and you cannot know and understand where's the cause coming from. You can just test and try. It's try and error. That's why you need a long training and testing period, because in many cases you don't know, I would say. Yeah.
Can I say something to that?
Yeah, sure.
So not like was established before, not all models are black boxes. So there is quite a lot of models where you can actually test relatively well what kind of variables they base their decisions on. But if you're working with deep learning and you really have no clue what's going on, there is explainability methods that people try to develop to sort of try to explain what's going on, for instance, what kind of image region an algorithm is focusing on when they're predicting that this is a cat on the image and so on. But even these systems are not perfect, right? You need to interpret the results, and they're not very easy to interpret for lay people, right? So this is a tricky situation.
And in which fields are these explainable models? Because you said now images. Is it only for computer vision?
No, it also exists for natural language processing, as far as I know, and like probably all sorts of different data, also tabular data, and so on. So yeah, but the ones that I've dealt with were image.
Image, yeah, because I only know about image, but then again we cannot say a general answer to that, and explainability is very hard, to find. Yeah, I was looking for a cheat sheet for explainability methods because it's something which I think require looking at the AI development right now. Yeah.
Sporty in here.
In the seat. I was thinking about these examples where I think it was like while COVID, where they tried to notice with AI what disease somebody has. And then in the end, they found out that the AI was looking at the surroundings and how the hospital looks, and then they decided, that could be cancer because he's lying on a cancer station, kind of like this. And you also said that one way to go around these biases would be to classify things that aren't related in the beginning, such as gender and pay. Are there any ways to go, how to define such things? Because I wouldn't think in the beginning of saying, the surrounding in a hospital isn't the parameter you should decide on which disease somebody has. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, that's the part, if you remember the slide from Steffi, where you say data labeling and annotation, where you need to, for example, in images, it will be labeled from humans at the moment, that they are defining in an ontology, you call that, describing the world and classify everything. That's a scene description. There's a plant, there's a chair, and so on. So there is always a process or a step before testing or training on developing a model where you annotate categories, data, interpret, so make it interpretable for this model.
Okay, but you don't always have it with deep learning, this tagging from pictures.
Again?
When you use a deep learning algorithm, you don't always tag the pictures in the beginning, so you don't always have this starting point. So you said that one option would be to define beforehand which things don't correlate. So your example was gender and pay. Yeah. So that the AI wouldn't use gender as an indicator. And I was thinking about if you have strategies to define which parameters aren't that relevant.
Are relevant or not?
Are not relevant.
That's depending on the use case, but I'm not sure, depending on the use case. But also with the deep learning, I always had use cases where we did annotate everything in the beginning, but we did not say or pre-process any label and say, okay, that's not relevant or not relevant. We always tested and tried it out. But I'm not sure if I answered your question.
It's okay. Thank you very much.
If anyone, has...
So there are ways, unsupervised learning is also
unsupervised,
a method, but probably not applicable to the example you gave. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, just a comment, because of the huge amounts of data that current systems use, sometimes you get spurious correlations. So you just have like these 13,000 people were treated in the same hospital by chance, and because we have 5 billion data points, that will make a difference, right? Even though it actually didn't have anything to do with the problem that you're trying to solve. So that's also something that I think machine learning engineers should think more about, that like more data is not always a great solution when it's impossible to check for all of these spurious correlations. So there's a trade-off there.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe a comment also from a practical side. So basically, what you said, I think it's pretty true that you can erase certain biases like gender and pay gaps, etc., before you actually go into these exploratory analysis. But I'm a little bit more like a statistician, and when we build machine learning models, then we would want to understand why that actually predicts stuff. And therefore, we would also use explainability methods like Shapley values and Lime, etc., which is applicable for classification, regression, and also object classification, etc. So there are plenty of methods. And then reverse engineer why the algorithm does make some decisions, and then understand that. And if that is plausible, then you go for it. Otherwise, you would reject the algorithm maybe fully, and then rebuild something more easily and understandable, which has maybe less bias. So understanding that is pretty much what the strategy I would go for is.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Yeah.
And that's AI. Any last question, maybe?
Yeah, here in the front there was all the time.
On the first few slides, you quoted some stats, like, I don't even know what exactly. I think like AI algorithms make you 40% more productive and make your customers 1,000,000% more happy.
Yeah.
I was just wondering where those numbers came from.
Yeah, good question. ChatGPT.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, I asked ChatGPT about the definitions. How would you define artificial intelligence? And what do you say about your goals of your artificial intelligence? And how much is the increasement? Give me some numbers and stats. And that's from ChatGPT.
I see.
Yeah. Huh?
So it must be everything.
Okay, maybe one last. You had one, right? One question? You had one? You? No one? I don't want to force anyone into question. It's like being a magician and pick someone and like, no, I don't want to be it. Okay, but I guess that's it then. And I guess we will go now into networking, chatting, maybe get some fresh air. It's getting hot in here. And yeah, I want to thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank again you and Shades and Contrast and of course Modular Design, because without them we wouldn't have meetups like this, because we wouldn't have rooms and maybe be at Stadtpark, and that wouldn't be so fun. So yeah, thanks again, maybe a huge round of applause, and yeah.